In chapter 150 of Chainsaw Man, Denji once again loses the life that he's built for himself and Naruto, with not only the loss of his third home that he knows, which had the memories he had with power, but the loss of Makima's 9 dogs, and the GOAT Mary, RIP Mary from 2020 to 2023, a true GOAT taken too soon. Stand proud Mary, you really were strong. And we get to finally see what Denji wants for his main dream in this chapter. But first, before we start, I noticed a good percentage of you guys aren't subscribed to the channel, so if you guys could hit that subscribe button and leave a like on the video, that would be greatly appreciated. The chapter starts off with Denji running through the alleyways of Japan with Naruto on his back, going back to his apartment despite Fumiko warning Denji that the place could be rigged as a trap. And as Denji and Naruto are making their way back over to the apartment, we get a little bit of world building because despite the death and destruction that was caused by the Chainsaw Man Church a few chapters ago, we see that people are still going to work even though there are cleaning crews actually loading the bodies of the people that died during the incident. And this scene really does set the tone of Chainsaw Man and just how much of a dystopian world it really is. Because even after an event that would be traumatic for many of us in the real world, it's pretty much become the norm in their world, so much that it doesn't affect the people in a way that many of us would really expect. And it shows that Denji's life of fighting devils the way he did, although it was insane, and may not be so insane after all. In fact, I'm pretty sure that most of the people in the world of Chainsaw Man probably do have a screw loose. I mean, I suppose you would need it to actually survive in a world like that. And as Denji hears this, he begins to think about and reflect on the normal life that he's been living all this time and of home. And I like this panel because it's the most relatable to pretty much most people. I mean, even if the world is crumbling around you or you're having a rough day, you can always go home, which is pretty much your safe space, where you can just be yourself and actually relax and just forget about a lot of your troubles. The irony for Denji is, even though he thinks of it that way, it clearly isn't the case, considering that he has public safety watching his every move, and I do mean his every move, and it is not like Denji is truly free to do whatever he wants the way that he actually wants to do it. But it seems like Denji has, in this moment, finally accepted and accomplished his dream of living a mundane, ordinary life, accepting that he doesn't have to be Chainsaw Man anymore, and that for the first time in his life, Denji's achieved true happiness on his own. But just as he realizes this, Denji steps on a dead crow foaming at the mouth, which I'm going to touch on later in this video. Bachina finally appears to Denji in what almost feels like a trance-like state and communicates directly to him for the first time since the end of part 1. And we see the reason why he's speaking to Denji in this moment was because for the second time, Denji's contract with Pochita has technically been fulfilled or, well, broken. Since Denji's contract with Pochita in exchange for him being Denji's heart was to live a normal life, well, now that Denji's achieved this, although it isn't exactly stated, Denji is more or less restating what he now wants out of the contract with Pochita since it's been fulfilled. Or rather, Pochita is instilling advice to Denji on what to do next, which is exactly what he's asking Denji in this moment. What do you want to do next now that you know what living an ordinary life feels like? And this is an important question in all of part 1 and in part 2 because Denji hasn't ever really thought about what he would do next. I mean, and most importantly, what Denji actually wants out of life. Because for most of Denji's life, he's always been a pawn and has never had a choice for what he wanted. Whether it was Makima, the Yakuza, public safety, Kishibe, and even Naruto when you think about it. Denji never got a chance to make decisions on his own or to really think for himself. And what makes this panel so special is because Denji has finally had a chance to talk to someone who cares about him for his well-being, for what he wants out of life. And he finally comes to the conclusion that even though he likes living an ordinary life, he's not having to suffer and fight devils, he still wants to be Chainsaw Man. And just when Denji has this realization, we see that Denji's apartment, along with all of his pets, his family is being burnt to ashes. And this is done by none other than Biram, who is just an absolute menace and is really keeping his word of having Denji transform whether he wants to or not, even if it means that he has to kill everyone that Denji loves or ever love and will hope to care about, and destroying the life that he's grown accustomed to. And Biram even shows his sadistic side because the reason why he went for the dogs and cats is because unlike Asa and Yoru, who have now become almost unstoppable, I mean, if Biram even tried to kill him, he would just get instantly low-diffed. Biram does acknowledge that even though Denji does like Asa, well, I mean, he does barely know her, and killing her wouldn't really fire him up, which I kind of like that someone is actually acknowledging this. Thank you, Fujimoto, for actually acknowledging this. But he does say cooking his pets would definitely hit a soft spot and get a reaction out of him. And it looked like it actually does, because just when Birama and Denji are about to transform to face off against each other, Fumiko beats the fraud allegations from last chapter and pulls up with the other public safety devil hunters to save Denji and Nayuta, which shows even though Denji and Nayuta were cold towards Fumiko, she does genuinely care about Denji and Nayuta's safety and is actually about doing her job. Although this is short-lived because the Rip Hybrid that we saw get defeated by Quan Chi has seemingly reappeared and has jumped public safety hunters, even splitting one of them in half and knocking Fumiko out, and that is actually how the chapter ends. Now, a couple of things I want to bring up is the symbolism of the chapter. The dead crow was actually the first crow we've seen in part 1 and in part 2 that is, well, actually dead, since all the crows in part 1 were actually alive. And the crows, from what we've seen, always seem to symbolize that death was always present, watching over someone, or, well, someone was just going to straight up die. It was just meant for death flags. In this case, a dead crow usually does represent rebirth or transformation, which refers to Denji's dream, or rather having his entire life changing in a drastic way for better or for worse. Or literally foreshadowing of Denji's transformation into Chainsaw Man, but not the hybrid form that we saw previously that we've seen Denji rock the entire time in part 1 and part 2, but the armored Pochita form that fought against Biram, Makima, and the other hybrids at the end of part 1. And I feel like this chapter really does likely explain why the Famine Devil and possibly even public safety wanted Denji to not transform into Chainsaw Man, or at least to deprive him of it, and to have him live a normal life. Because by Denji fulfilling his dream, it would actually allow him to rewrite his contract with Pochita to possibly become even more stronger, which is what the Famine Devil and likely even public safety at the end of the day could actually want. Another thing I want to touch on is 2 plants were also shown which look the same from Denji's apartment, and while one of them is knocked over, the other one is actually pretty healthy. And this could symbolize the mentality of Denji and Nayuta, because while Nayuta has grown more as a person in a short amount of time, Denji has grown more and more depressed, insane, and lost a lot of self-respect that he's built up for himself since the end of part 1. And this could be foreshadowing Denji having the worst mental breakdown that we've ever seen Denji have, where Denji's mind becomes so vulnerable, the Famine Devil could swoop in to control Denji, which is something that the Famine Devil could possibly do, but we still don't know how her abilities yet, 50 chapters into part 2's story. Or this could also just be foreshadowing just a setup of the War Devil and Chainsaw Man showdown, because we do know in a panel where Denji was starting to lose his composure, a roar could actually be heard, which at first I actually thought was coming from the fire that was burning in the background, but it's actually coming from Denji's heart, symbolizing some sort of awakening in Denji's new strength as a result of the new terms of his contract, but also his mental decline. But let me know down in the comments, guys, what you guys thought of this chapter down below. With all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.